Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our Ironwood virtual Lunch and Learn today. Today's presentation is being presented by Kara Biber, one of our Ironwood dietitians. And her presentation will be Survivorship, Eating Like a Survivor, a Guide to the Mediterranean Diet. Please help me in welcoming Kara.
Hi, everybody. Like Sierra said, I'm Kara. I'm one of the dietitians here at Ironwood, and I cover the East Valley locations. So today we're going to start discussing a plant-based diet and that Mediterranean diet. So now that your treatment is over, you may be thinking, now what? Now what can I be doing to reduce that risk of recurrence and really support a healthy lifestyle? So we really want to be incorporating the American Institute of Cancer Research lifestyle recommendations by promoting a gradual weight loss to a healthy weight if we're not already there. And that would be a BMI between 19 and 24.9, and really trying to focus on eating a plant-based or a plant-focused diet. The American Institute of Cancer Research has put out 10 recommendations to help reduce and prevent cancer, as well as reducing that risk of recurrence. So going through these, the first one, be that healthy weight. So if we're not already that healthy weight, trying to promote that weight loss, trying to be physically active as best as possible. The goal for that is trying to incorporate at least 150 minutes of moderate activity on a weekly basis, or about 30 to 60 minutes of activity per day. Eating a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruit, and beans, what we refer to as a plant-based diet, and really trying to limit the consumption of fast food and other processed foods that are high in fat, starches, and sugar. We want to be limiting the consumption of processed and red meats, limiting the consumption of sugar-sweetened drinks, as well as sugar-sweetened desserts and other foods, limiting the consumption of alcohol, and we do not want to just use supplements for cancer prevention. Without really changing our diet and our lifestyle, supplements really won't be doing much for us, but they may be able to help support a regular healthy diet and add some extra benefits, but on their own, they're not going to cure or prevent cancer. For mothers, we want to be breastfeeding our baby if you can. And then after a cancer diagnosis is really when you want to start participating in these recommendations. Ideally, everybody should be following these recommendations, whether we have a cancer diagnosis, but these are really to prevent that cancer. As you can see, I bolded the ones that are related to diet and that we're going to be going over today. So you can see how our diet really impacts our health and can help reduce that risk of recurrence. So when we talk about what a plant-based diet is, it may sound a little confusing because there are so many products out now that claim to be plant-based. So that plant-based diet doesn't mean just to be replacing our meats with these plant-based alternatives, such as like the Impossible Burger or the Beyond Meats and things like that. It's really more focusing on including plant-based foods. So right here, if we're looking at what we want to set up our plates like in this plant-based, or what I would call a plant-focused diet, this is what the American Institute of Cancer Research has put out. So if we're looking at this plate, you can notice that at least 2/3 of it are plant-based foods. We see broccoli, what looks like to be carrots, and some rice, and then a small portion of meat. This is really how we want to be setting up our plates on a daily basis at every single meal. Limiting those animal proteins and really focusing on plant foods. So if we're looking at our plates, if we look at this traditional plate, this is really what our Western diet, American diet currently looks like. We'll see large portions of meat, large portion of starches and starchy vegetables, with not a lot of variety of fruits and vegetables in our plate. And then we're comparing it to this. This would be that goal plate when we're following this plant-based diet. What we see here is at least half of that plate is coming from some type of non-starchy vegetable. Here we've got a variety of vegetables like broccoli, tomatoes, zucchini, and peppers. A small portion of a whole grain, that looks like it's quinoa. So you can see it's a much smaller portion of a starch than on that previous normal diet for the American. And then a small portion of a lean protein, which it looks like we've got some chicken breast on this plate. So this is just a visual representation of what a dinner or a lunch plate should be looking like when we're following this plant-based diet. In terms of that plant-based and plant-focused diet, those plant foods that we really want to be focusing on and really making the majority of our meals are going to be those whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, and soy products. So really anything that's grown out of the ground are our plant foods. Like I was saying, at least 2/3 of our plate should be consisting of these plant foods. With a goal of half of our plate being fruits and especially those non-starchy vegetables, we really want to be focusing on those non-starchy vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, asparagus, eggplant, tomatoes, carrots, getting lots of colors in our diet. 1/4 of our plate should be coming from whole grains, beans, legumes, or starchy vegetables. So compared to what we typically eat, which maybe we're eating rice or pasta at a meal, where that would be a very large component of our dish, it really should just be a small serving rather than taking up most of the plate. And then choosing 1/3 of our plate from an animal product, specifically lean proteins, which we'll get into. And we don't have to be including animal proteins at our meals. We can be replacing those with plant-based proteins, and we want to be doing that often. If that's not something you currently do, if you eat a lot of animal proteins at your mealtime, trying to make a goal of eating at least 1 meatless day per week or 2 meatless meals per week is a good place to start as you transition to more of this plant-based eating. We don't just get protein from animal sources. So some great sources of protein in our diet that are coming from plants can be beans, soy foods, and legumes. Any type of variety of beans. We've got black beans, cannelli beans, kidney beans. There's so many different ones that we can be experimenting with. They're great in a cold salad, great as warm dishes. So really trying to utilize those as frequently in our diet as well. It is recommended to eat beans at least 2 to 3 times per week, if not on a daily basis. The benefits of eating beans, they're going to provide a lot of those fibers in our diet, which is great for digestion, as well as another source of that lean protein and a variety of vitamins and minerals. In soy foods, I know this is often controversial and people do get scared a little bit of the soy foods, but we know that whole soy foods can help reduce that risk of recurrence, even in things like breast cancer. And we really want to be focusing on whole soy foods. So not just choosing, we don't want to be choosing the small foods that have soy in them, but really focusing on using tofu or tempeh or edamame in our dishes to get that protein. And then choosing legumes as well. So legumes are going to be lentils, split peas, black-eyed peas, and garbanzo beans, also known as chickpeas. So those are great things that can be cold or warm. Side, it could be your main meal, the main the main protein of your dish, but also can be things like a side if you are choosing to eat an animal protein that day. So if I had to put a kind of a label on what this plant-based diet, if we're thinking of terms of diets that we've heard about or get recognized, that would be that Mediterranean diet. So that Mediterranean diet is coming from that Mediterranean region around the Mediterranean Sea. So it's that eating pattern of the populations there in countries like Greece, Italy, France, Spain, as well as other ones that maybe we don't consider, like Morocco and Libya and Lebanon, countries like that as well. So it is a large variations in diet, but they do all have generally the same components. So really, if we're looking at where to kind of look for more information, if you want to do more research, that Mediterranean diet is a great place to start. We know that studies show that the Mediterranean diet, people who follow this type of eating pattern tend to live longer lives, have less diseases such as cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, diabetes, and also less obesity. So following this diet can certainly make an impact on our weight if that weight loss is one of your goals. The nice thing about the Mediterranean diet is it's not really a diet like, a fad diet that we kind of get hooked into sometimes. It is something that's very sustainable. It's not very restrictive compared to other diets that are popular in our society right now. So this is something that can be easily maintained throughout a lifetime. So if we're kind of looking at this pyramid, this is kind of their standard of what foods and the portions of what we want to be focusing on. Similar to what our pyramid used to look like, with the foods you include the most at the bottom and working way up. So we can see here that they want to promote that activity in this diet and this lifestyle, especially family time. So eating around together and participating in physical activity. But you'll notice that first ring of the pyramid, really focusing on those plant-based foods, getting a lot of variety of those fruits and vegetables and whole grains, beans, nuts, legumes, seeds, and herbs. So these should be the base of our meals like we've been discussing. That next tier of that pyramid is incorporating fish and seafood. So we know that fish is going to provide us some of those healthy proteins as well. If we're choosing fatty fish, we'll get those healthy fats that are great for inflammation and reducing inflammation. The goal would be eating at least 2 to 3 servings of fatty fish per week. And that's going to include things like salmon, sardines, herring, black cod. But there's really no seafood that is off the table. You can choose whatever you would like, but really including that fatty fish the best we can. The next tier there, these are going to be foods that are a part of the diet, but really in moderation. So poultry, but really small, moderate portions of these types of foods, the cheeses and yogurts as well, on a daily or weekly basis. We do include a lot of cheese, and I think in our diet, people seem to really enjoy cheese. But when we think of serving sizes, cheese really is a very small serving size of 1 ounce, which is typically about a slice of cheese, like a sandwich cheese, or an inch by inch square. So we can see how sometimes we overeat these foods in our normal day. But choosing the poultry as other sources of protein on occasion and smaller portions. At that top of the pyramid, you see that the red meat, that is going to include beef, pork, or lamb, is eating much less often. It doesn't necessarily have to be off the table. It's not something you have to completely avoid, but trying to limit it as best as possible. And we'll go into a little bit more of the specifics. And then eating sweets less as well. We don't want to be eating sweets on a daily, weekly basis, but it's okay to enjoy ice cream and a cake, 1 or 2 times a month. That's okay. You'll see that there's also wine in moderation here. We know that red wine can provide antioxidants, and so it would be okay to utilize that. If we're not a wine drinker, 100% grape juice can also provide the same amount of antioxidants as red wine. And then really focusing on water as our sole source of hydration. So like we've been discussing, this Mediterranean diet, really focusing on those non-starchy vegetables. Really trying to choose a variety of different vegetables on a daily basis. Really choosing bold colors and strong flavors. We don't want to just be eating the same vegetables over and over. Those non-starchy vegetables and some starchy vegetables are going to provide a variety of vitamins and minerals, and as well as phytochemicals, which help fight cancer and reduce those cell growth and spread. So really trying to get those in our diet as best as possible. We want to be including that fruit, again, trying to get a variety of different fruits. We know that berries and pomegranate also have really great cancer fighting properties, so are great ones to be including on a daily basis. And we're choosing whole grains over those refined grains like white bread, white pasta, and white rice. We know that intact grains, rather than just like choosing whole grain breads or whole grain pasta, has more benefit. So choosing things like oatmeal, brown and wild rice, quinoa, barley, bulgur, rye. Some of these maybe are not as common in our diet right now, but certainly are great additions to add more fiber and get more of those antioxidant properties. We want to be choosing those lean proteins, so things like chicken, turkey, fish as well, legumes, like we talked about, those lentils, chickpeas, split peas, those whole soy products, and eggs as well. And then another good source of protein can be those nuts and seeds. I didn't mention those earlier because they're not, something that we typically would make as the main component of our meal to get protein, but are great snacks or additions to our meals to get a little extra protein. The Mediterranean diet really focuses on healthy fat. So most of our plant-based fats are very healthy for us and have those anti-inflammatory properties. We want to be including a variety, really trying to include avocado on a daily basis. Olive oil, we use very in moderate portions here, cooking with it, seasoning and dressing our salads with it, and using it where we can. And of course, including olives as well, something we can snack on or add to dishes. Nuts and seeds are another great option. There's really no limit of which ones you have to include, trying to get a variety of different nuts and seeds. They're going to provide you more fiber, those healthy fats, and protein. So kind of great go-to snacks to throw in the diet to keep you full and get some good nutrition in there for you. Focusing on those fatty fish, like I said, the salmon, herring, sardines, black cod, any of those cold water fish are going to be a great source of those healthy fats to reduce inflammation. And then adding things like chia seed and flaxseed are another beneficial food that can be thrown into baked goods, oatmeal, smoothies. That lots of research is coming out now that may be showing those cancer preventative properties. And then finally, those dairy products. Really, this is only in moderation. There is some studies suggesting now that dairy may be something we want to be excluding from our diet. But in terms, if we want to be including low fat or non-fat yogurt into our diet, then that will be a good source of protein for you. If you choose to include dairy, again, really sticking with that non-fat or low-fat yogurt, and especially unsweetened yogurt and small portions of cheeses. It may be a good idea to try to avoid drinking milk in general. That may be where more of the concern is in terms of cancer and dairy products. So we talked about really trying to incorporate a variety of colors in our diet. This is a nice chart of really what colors we should be including and some of those beneficial properties of including these different colors in our diet. So red, we want to be incorporating tomatoes and tomato products, things like watermelon, red peppers, guava. Those have those antioxidant properties. Oranges, carrots, yams, sweet potatoes, pumpkins. They're a good source of beta-carotene for us and can help support the immune system, and also another powerful antioxidant. those yellows and oranges, grapefruits, papayas, peaches, great sources of vitamin C and those flavonoids that can inhibit tumor growth. Greens, I feel like we can get a pretty fair amount of greens in our diet. Thinking of those leafy greens, spinach, kale, collard greens. You're going to get that folate, which is good for our cells and genetic material. So trying to include those often in our diet. And of course, we've got those cruciferous vegetables that are green and white, like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. Those have been really shown to have great anti-cancer properties. So it is recommended to try to include cruciferous vegetables on a daily basis in our diet. It's great to be seasoning our foods with garlics and onions. They've got some other phytochemicals that again help with the death of cancer cells and can help support that immune system. Blues, we want to be including those blueberries and grapes and plums. They'll help destroy those free radicals in our body. Those reds and purples like grapes and berries, again, plums, they kind of fall into the same category, as well as things like you can get purple cauliflower and purple carrots, purple potatoes, as well as eggplant to get those purples in our diet. And then our browns, like our whole grains and legumes, which are going to give us a great amount of fiber. So if we're thinking of how we want to be stocking that kitchen for that Mediterranean diet, I kind of listed out a good kind of shopping list for you. If we're thinking of what we can stock our pantry up to be prepared to eat this Mediterranean plant-based diet way. Trying to get those dried beans. Dried beans are going to be a little bit preferred over canned beans, but if we do canned beans, trying to get low sodium options and rinsing those off. For breads, again, choosing those whole grains. We can do like breadcrumbs, focaccia, lavish, and pita bread, and other types of whole grain breads. Again, we don't want to just be doing whole grain breads. We want to be doing those intact whole grains, like we talked about earlier. But it's okay to be doing some of these regular breads and crackers in our diet. Canned seafood is another great thing, kind of something easy we can have on hand to help stick with that diet. Doing canned sardines, tuna, salmon, perfect things to be having stocked up in our pantry. Capers are another great thing to add to dishes. They got kind of a salty and a little sour type flavor, I suppose. Great to be adding to pasta dishes, things like that. A nice little touch. Including whole grain cereals, oatmeal is a great thing to be including, as a morning meal. We can be choosing whole grains to be adding our seafood salads on, and there's a variety of whole grain crackers out there now to have as snacks rather than going for things like chips. Dried fruits are a great option as something that we can add to the diet. The big thing with dried fruit is you do want to pay attention to the amount of sugar on there, because a lot of our dried fruit is sugar sweetened. So trying to find ones with no added sugar is going to be the best bet. Garlic is a great thing to have in the house. We know that garlic has anti-cancer properties. So having a couple bulbs of that, cooking with it frequently in the diet. When you are cooking with garlic, it's great to kind of break it open, cut it open for 10 minutes before you start cooking with it to increase those anti-cancer properties. Again, stocking up that pantry with a variety of different grains that maybe it's not something that you're used to adding in the diet, like the bulgur, couscous, quinoa, which is another great source of protein, lenta oats, the brown and wild rices, millet, and farro. These can be warm dishes, cold dishes, really trying to experiment with these different types of grains. Really loading up that pantry with dried herbs and spices, trying to season with those frequently rather than seasoning with salt. Giving your body, your taste buds a change, trying something that you normally don't. I grew up only eating like oregano and parsley and like garlic on our foods because I'm Italian, but trying new things like turmeric and a curry and things like that are great to be trying. We can use honey as a sweetener over table sugar. It doesn't have as big of a response in our body, so that may be an okay alternative. But again, we don't want to be doing crazy amounts of honey. Again, trying to stock that pantry with nuts. I stress this a lot to patients, really trying to get nuts in the diet because they are a great source of protein and fiber and those healthy fats, and are good to replace those normal snacky foods like potato chips and pretzels with, because you'll get a little bit more nutrition out of them. Really trying to use that extra virgin olive oil when we're cooking and using in salads. You can buy lighter olive oil to utilize in baking that's not as strong as a flavor, but that should really be your go-to oil over some of those other common oils that we typically cook with. Olives, olives are a great kind of go-to snack, great to add to pasta dishes and salads as well, and trying to get different varieties of olives. Choosing whole grain pasta rather than those white pastas. Again, something we can include in the diet, but we don't want to be eating very large portions of those. Any type of potato is a great side to, our plant-based diet. Reds, purples, really no limitation there. Getting varieties of the sweet potatoes, white potatoes, whatever you would like. We can include that red wine in our diet as well. Choosing things like seeds, pumpkin seeds, have great healthy fats in there. Flaxseed ground is another great thing to throw into foods. Sunflower seeds, other great snacks to be including. We can be keeping things like canned tomatoes in our pantry just to have as for recipes, and then utilizing vinegars in our cooking. Really any type of vinegar, apple cider vinegar, balsamic, red wine, great things to be seasoning with. If we're thinking about what we should, kind of stock up on the fridge and on the countertop, our fresh fruits, again, really no limitations of which ones to be including, trying to get a variety. That poultry, hummus, and other types of dips, there's lots of different flavored hummus now that are great to be choosing, dipping our vegetables in, as well as things like edamame dips that we can be including. Mustard is another thing we can be seasoning and replace, using on our foods to get different flavored. Pesto is another great kind of condiment or sauce to be seasoning with, marinating our foods with. Pickles they're fermented, so they'll give you a little probiotics in the diet as well. Again, don't want to go overboard because they are pretty salty. Tapenade, I may have said that wrong, but there is a great hummus with olive tapenade on it. I recommend trying that if you like olives. Really stocking up on that fridge of vegetables. Those days don't need to just be one vegetable per meal. We can have a variety of vegetables per meal to try to increase our intake. And then trying to do that non-fat, low-fat yogurt, especially unsweetened yogurt, which can be kind of something to snack on as a dessert with fruit or something like that. And then we can keep some frozen fruit, our frozen meats, frozen vegetables, and frozen chicken stock in our freezer to have prepared and ready to cook. That way we have things on hand if we need a quick dinner or something like that. And if we need a little sweet, we can include something like sorbet or gelato rather than our normal full fat ice cream. So some specific recommendations with fruits and vegetables. Really the goal is trying to eat at least 4 to 5 servings of vegetables per day, especially those non-starchy vegetables. Ideally we can be eating more than this, but this is really that kind of go-to goal. If we're not eating that much now, slowly, really trying to gradually increase that. At least 2 to 3 servings of fruit per day. A lot of times we lump this recommendation into 8 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetables, but really most of the servings should be coming from vegetables, not just fruit. We mentioned this, but eating beans and legumes at least 2 to 3 times per week, if not on a daily basis. That's going to help us get to those fiber goals. and help get some more protein in our diet. Trying to eat at least 1 serving of nuts and seeds on a daily basis. A serving is 1 ounce. So what that kind of equates out to be, I think for almonds, it's like 20 almonds would be considered a serving. Now just know that nuts and seeds are very high in calorie because they are fatty. So if your goal is weight loss, you may not want to just be eating these freely, just sticking to a smaller portion to get those healthy fats. And then including that seafood like we discussed, at least 2 to 3 servings of those fatty fish per week to get those healthy fats. For red and processed meats, these we really want to be limiting. So ideally, we're not eating any red meat in our diet, but if that's something that you feel like you'll have a hard time cutting out, the goal would be to eat less than 12 ounces per week. So maybe once or twice per week, it's okay to have some beef or pork or lamb. And if we are choosing that, trying to choose those lower fat options like the loin or groin or round cuts. Those are going to be leaner, and taking off any visible fat that you can. The big thing here is really trying to avoid those processed meats. So bacon, sausage, lunch and deli meats are all considered processed. If they're preserved with salts, then really they shouldn't have a very big place in our diet. These are foods that we don't want to be eating on a daily basis. Or even a weekly basis, trying to avoid them as best as possible. Red and processed meats have been linked specifically to colorectal cancers. The big thing here, we hear a lot of trying to avoid sugars, and sugar causes cancer. Now, the goal really is to avoid foods with added sugars. Added sugars is different than naturally occurring sugars like fruits and vegetables and whole grains. The goal is to consume less than 10% of our calories from added sugars per day. That would be the American recommendation, but other organizations recommend less than 5% of our calories per day. So what that kind of looks like is for women, it would be less than 25 grams per day, and for men, less than 37 grams of sugar per day, added sugars. So if we think of like a soda, a can of soda, regular soda typically has about 39 grams of sugar in it. So that would exceed your sugar intake for a whole day. And that's not including maybe the honey or the syrup that we would put on a food, or maybe the small package of cookie we would eat. So I'll show you on the next slide of a label on how we can tell how much added sugar is in our diet. The best way to avoid added sugars is to be preparing our foods at home and avoiding these processed foods that are already pre-made for us. If you start looking at labels more of some of these things that maybe we're buying from the store, it is pretty shocking to see how much food or how much added sugars are in foods. Like I said earlier, dried fruit. My sister had a package of dried cherries the other day, and we looked, and there was like 29 grams of added sugars to that serving of cherries. So we just want to be paying attention to foods like that. Again, really that goal is to be cooking and preparing our meals at home as much as possible. And then limiting alcohol. Red wine and alcohol may have some place in our diet, but we shouldn't be drinking large quantities of it. For women, it's recommended to drink less than 1 glass per day. And for men, it'd be less than 2 per day, if not even less than that, and not on a daily basis. But I have listed out here the servings of what a standard drink is. So beer would be 12 ounces, wine, it's 5 ounces. And for spirits and like mixed drinks, it would be 1.5 ounce pours. So trying to do less than that per day. So looking here, these are the new nutrition labels. You can see here that this category here includes added sugars. So those are going to be sugars like table sugar that is added to a food to sweeten it, not those naturally occurring sugars. So We can see in this, whatever this may have been, it has 37 grams of carbohydrate, and that's not a bad thing. Again, that could be rice or some type of whole grain or a piece of fruit. That would be carbohydrates. It's got some fiber in there, and it's great to have high fiber. And when we're looking at breads and pastas, trying to use that higher fiber brands. And then we've got total sugars. So total sugars doesn't mean the added sugar. So old labels would just say total sugars. This one we can see has 2 grams of naturally occurring sugars, whether it's a piece of fruit or something like that. But this has 10 grams of added sugar in it per day, per serving. So that's really what we want to be paying attention to. Trying to find, if we're buying things with labels and pre-made for us, trying to get that the closest to 0 for those added sugars is most important. So if we're kind of putting all this together and how we start incorporating these healthful foods into our diet, following that Mediterranean diet. So some ideas here for avocados, mashing it on toast instead of butter or jelly, enjoying guacamole as a dip with vegetables instead of chips. Some kind of easy ways to add those into our diet. I think putting avocados in eggs is delicious. Avocado toast is very popular these days. Also, you can be using avocado to mix with chicken to make a chicken salad rather than things like mayonnaise. Adding beans, into that diet, you can use them in casseroles. If we're having a hard time decreasing that meat intake, using half of beans, half ground meat in those recipes that you already, enjoy eating. So if it's your taco day, you're doing half of the ground meat that you typically do, and then maybe a can of beans or, a cup or 2 of beans in that mixture to kind of substitute some of that protein. We can puree beans to also make them into dips, to dip our vegetables in there, or some pita chips, things like that. Adding hummus, again, can be a dip, but can also be spread on sandwiches instead of mayo. And you can get a variety of different flavors of hummus to really try something new. Fruit is pretty easy. It's something easy we can grab and snack on. We can kind of replace it with any of those sweets that we incorporate in our diet, using it as that dessert, putting it on yogurt instead of ice cream, and replacing ice cream if you like to snack on ice cream at night. We can also use fruit to sweeten some of the baked goods that we normally make. If you make muffins or cookies, you can replace unsweetened applesauce or mashed banana for the oil in your baking goods. So you would do half the oil, and then it's typically like a half a cup of applesauce or mashed banana to save on some of those unhealthy fats. And incorporating olive oil, using, if you're eating bread, that whole grain bread at a meal, dipping it into olive oil instead of spreading it with butter. Another great option, throw some rosemary in that olive oil, a little bit of vinegar, dip it in there. It's a nice little treat. Sauteing our vegetables in olive oil. If we're cooking those, tossing our vegetables in there if you're baking it. We can be tossing our popcorn in olive oil and some herbs to kind of season it rather than using butter all the time. And popcorn is a great snack to get some extra fiber. And we can substitute oil for butter in baked goods as well. And that would be an option where you can use like light olive oil rather than the extra virgin to help with the flavor, because olive oil does have a strong flavor. Whole grains, this is something we can stuff peppers with a variety of whole grains rather than meat, stuffing it with rice or quinoa to fill them up if you do stuffed peppers at home. We want to be replacing that white rice with those whole grains like brown rice or wild rice. Using whole wheat flour in place of white flour if you're going to do any baked goods. If we want to incorporate some dairy in our product, using Greek yogurt, and when we are buying yogurt, buying unsweetened yogurt or unflavored yogurt is going to be the best option, because flavored yogurts or fruited yogurt does typically have added sugars in there. But Greek yogurt can be used as mayonnaise in pasta salads or potato salads. It can also replace sour cream. It's pretty tart, so can help replace some of those unhealthy fats with some little extra protein for you. Also, it can be used again as a dessert or in smoothies. And then using herbs and spices, really frequently in our cooking. That's going to help you replace the salt in our diet. You can also cut out some of that sugar in baked goods and using more of those powerful spices like cinnamon and ginger, nutmeg, cloves to enhance the flavor. So if we're kind of looking at some ideas of what a diet should be on a daily basis, is, breakfast can be something like a veggie omelet. It can be whole or egg whites, doesn't really matter. You'll save a little bit on fat if you choose to do egg whites, but you'll get half the protein. But mixing that with a half a cup of chopped up broccoli, some tomatoes, onion, and fresh garlic, and make a little omelet out of it. Could be any type of vegetable you like. I personally like broccoli in my eggs, so that's what I do pretty frequently. On the side of that, rather than toast, you can choose a half a cup of cooked oats with a tablespoon of flaxseed in there. Maybe if you have a hard time eating oatmeal unsweetened, try adding berries to it or a tiny bit of honey to sweeten it rather than table sugar. And then you have some sort of fruit on the side. A cup of berries would be a good option. And we can rotate. We can do smoothies and things like that, toast and eggs to get different varieties. Maybe mid-morning we have a small snack of a small handful of almonds and a small apple. It's always great to pair fruit with some type of protein or fat to help keep that energy level stable throughout the day, as well as avoid large amounts of blood sugar spikes, which sometimes can lead to weight gain. So pairing any type of fruit with the almonds, nuts, seeds, peanut butter is always a great option. For lunch, maybe we'll have a leafy salad. In terms of serving sizes, 1 cup of leafy greens is considered a serving. A half a cup of cooked vegetables is considered a serving. So at least 1 cup of leafy greens, if not more. You can be adding a half a cup of black beans, some chopped up avocado, a chopped up bell pepper, 1/4 a cup of corn, some red onion, kind of making like a kind of southwestern salad. And you can dress that with olive oil and vinegar or lemon, rather than something like ranch, which is going to provide you unhealthy fats and a lot of extra calories. As another snack, again, trying to get those vegetables in, so we can be slicing up some vegetables, carrots and cucumbers. They can be raw or cooked, and dipping those in a 1/2 cup of hummus, 1/4 a cup of hummus or any type of dip you like. And then dinner, we're including some salmon, that fatty fish, seasoned with some herbs rather than salt, a cup of baked asparagus, and a 1/2 cup of cooked quinoa. This is what that normal day can look like. It doesn't have to be too complex. And then if we're feeling something sweet at the end of the day, we can do 6 ounces of a fat-free, unsweetened Greek yogurt, topped with some pineapple or the fruit of your choice. You can put that in the freezer and make a little frozen yogurt out of it as well, rather than grabbing something like regular ice cream. Here are some quick recipe resources if you're looking for different ideas. I personally like the American Institute of Cancer Research. You can find that at AICR.org. They have great tips on cancer prevention and survivorship, as well as a variety of recipes and some food facts on some foods that may be beneficial to include in the diet for cancer prevention and cancer fighting qualities. The American Cancer Society also has some good recipes on there with different plant-based recipes that when we're looking for new things to try. The Cancer Fighting Kitchen by Rebecca Katz is another great resource during treatment and then post-treatment. And then I personally like the Complete Mediterranean Cookbook by America's Test Kitchen. That's what I use to get my recipes at home, and I haven't found one bad recipe, but it's pretty detailed on ways to cook and what to look for with different types of foods. All right, at this time, I will take any questions anybody has.
All right, Kara, it doesn't look like we have any questions at this time, but it looks like we do have a request for handouts that you had reviewed here in your presentation. So if anybody else has any questions, please do not hesitate to review this presentation on our YouTube channel. Also, please stay tuned for next week's presentation, Exercising Like a Survivor, at the same time and place, 11 a.m. If you need the link, please email wellness@ironwoodcrc.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care.